Hi, I'm Doug Vogt again from the Diehill Foundation. The reason for the delay between part 3 and this part 4 is because I got the flu in the beginning of the year, and then I went to the Computer Electronics Show in Las Vegas, which was very interesting. And I'm finally well enough to do these videos, because I didn't want to cough my guts up and stuff like that. It wouldn't sound too good. Anyway, this is the long-awaited part 4 of series 4, and I'm going to divide part 4 into 3 sections. This first one, I'm going to cover the sedimentary evidence, carbon-14 dating, that the sun does nova and this clock cycle does occur. The other part I'm going to cover is what happens to the crust of the Earth when this reversal happens. And then also an increase in volcanic activity also seems to happen at the same time during the reversal period. I'll also cover what is causing the Earth's magnetic field. Now, the reason I'm going to add a part 3 to this thing is I've read some of the comments that you've had, and there was a lot of comments regarding the proof of why does the Earth's rotation stop and then reverses and go the other direction. And it's an excellent question. And I evidently didn't do a good enough job in presenting it in, I think it was part 3 on the oceans. There's a scientific reason, and using the theory of multidimensional reality, I did cover part of it. It has to do, in series 1, it has to do with why the natural log shows up in our reality. It gets down to the atom, and as it comes into this dimension. So you deserve a better explanation. I'm going to give you one. That's going to be in part 3 or C of this part 4. Anyway, we'll continue. Most of the information for this comes from chapter 8. Now, there's only about 340 or 50 of these books left. And when it's done with, I'm going to redo and expand the chapter 8 on the causes of the Ice Age and polar reversals and bring it up to date. This book was done like 11 years ago. So I've added a bunch of other stuff, and I've also changed some of my views of sequence or what happens and why the universe is created, which I might put in this. It was in chapter 12 in this book. So that's one of the reasons I'm going to create another book. Let's just be called the Causes of the Ice Age and Polar Reversals. Let me see what else. I think that's about it. Of course, the purpose of these videos is to be forewarned is to be forearmed. If you understand what's going to happen, we, the American people, have to put pressure on government to do something. When I get to part 5 of this series, you'll understand this is too big a project for any small group or even a large group of people. It's really a national level you've got to deal with, and where you have to be to have any hope of surviving this event. Okay, let's start in. On some of the comments I had seen, some were quite good and helpful. And one of them was somebody had mentioned this. I'll go into it in a second. Remember when this whole thing started, when they started doing the space program, and why they did it was because of the Glasberg circuit, which was December 1957. And sun went nuts. I covered that earlier in series 4. So they first put a postage stamp out like about, I think it was like May of 58. And by the end of July, they created NASA. So what do they have for the name of the project that goes to the moon? Apollo. Apollo is the second Greek god, sun god. So they got the Greek sun god going to the moon to collect the evidence that the sun novas, because it's untouched by wind and rain and stuff like that we have here on the Earth, to bring back to the Earth to prove that the sun did nova. And the other one is Public Broadcasting's science series is called Nova. In other words, they're hiding it in plain sight, what this is all about. But they want to make sure you don't know it. So, as I said in the first part of this series 4, they concocted other explanations of phenomena that should never have been happened. I mean, they should never have done it. Some of the explanations are so incredibly stupid that it just boggles my mind that they can get away with it. Anyway, one of them was, a comment was by Chicago Do-It-Yourself. The fellow gave me this, and I'm glad he did, because it made me a better researcher. So I started researching. He was saying basically that I was wrong when I said a comet is a big dirty snowball. Now, I had said earlier that a comet is formed by when this dust shell hits the Earth, it grabs a bunch of stuff, the water vapor and stuff like that's been evaporated, and it sends it off into space, and that's why comets have a radically elliptical orbit. It always seems to come around and loop around the sun, and that's what's going on. So, this is a comet, 67P, that the European Space Agency actually circled for about 2 years. I got all the reports. I read about 5 or 6 of the journals and the one produced by the European Space Agency. So I know what I'm talking about now, and I'm sure of it. Anyway, this is this comet, 67P, as it's outgassing when the sun hit it. Now, I have, these are not meteors. I have a Rocky-type meteor that I got from the Sinai and also a nickel-iron meteor. Those things don't outgas. They can't. They're too dense. Okay, one of the articles, this is the journal Science from 2016. There's the reference. Rosetta Comet, that's what they call that comet, P67, sheds its dusty mantle to reveal its icy nature. Comets are dirty snowballs made of ice and dust, but they are dark because the ice sublimates away, leaving some of the dust behind on the surface. What they did was they collected 35,000 dust samples as they were circling this comet, and they analyzed it. Now, their spectrum analyzer was kind of limited. It looks like 2.5 feet long, about 1.5 feet by 1.5 feet around, and that's kind of small to do what they were doing, but maybe they were stuck with a weight issue and also a size issue. This is what they found. 30% hydrogen, 30% oxygen, 30% carbon. Well, H2O, gee, there's your H2, hydrogen and oxygen. This is by atomic percentage. They did this kind of weird, the Europeans. I don't know why. This is by weight. 40% was oxygen, 30% was carbon, silicon was 13%. The balance here and over here is basically we're going to go into the chemical composition of the glass beads found on the moon. You'll see it's the same stuff. Now, it breaks down to this: organic material, 45%. Minerals, 55%. I'm going to explain where the organic came from. Organic molecules make up half of the comet 67P. The Rosetta Spacer collected more than 35,000 dust grains from comet 67P, helped determine its chemical composition. The largest grains had diameters of about 1 millimeter, while the smallest had a diameter of about 0.01 millimeters. That's the same size as the glass beads that were found on the moon, as well as certain layers in the Earth. Same size. Dust likely made of the same ingredients as the comet's nucleus. Now, the whole thing is just a bunch of glass beads. Organic molecules, which are carbon-based molecules like the proteins, carbohydrates, nucleic acid, account for 45% of the total mass of the collected dust. The team found the remaining 55% of dust was inorganic materials, mostly silicates. Glass is silicates. Okay, this is the chemical composition from Apollo 11, 17, and here's two more samples from 11. These are from the journal articles I also have from Apollo 12 also. It was all the same. This is the average over here. These are the main ingredients: silicon, aluminum, iron, calcium, magnesium, but also found sodium, potassium, titanium, phosphorus, manganese, chromium, and sulfur. They also found gold on that comet too, but not enough to go mine, so forget it. Anyway, you can see there's a big difference. 49%, 55%, depends on the sample where they got, down to 38%. It depends on where they went. Now, there's a reason why. You can never assume that a dust shell coming from the sun is going to be totally homogeneous. It isn't. It has different chemical compositions for each part of it. We don't know why, and it's unimportant we know why. All we know is the sun is producing a lot of elements, not just hydrogen and helium and whatever. It's probably the entire periodic table. This is what they found from 67P, that comet. Silicon. Now this is the weird part. They did a comparison between iron and manganese, aluminum, sodium, etc. All the yellow is the same ones that I showed you from the moon. It's the same chemical composition. Unfortunately, they don't give us the percentage of each of the grains. I guess they couldn't because of the equipment that they brought there. But there's no question, it's the same chemical formulas. Here's another how they display it. If you go onto their European Space Agency and you read the articles or the ones in Science or Nature, read the stuff and you'll understand. It's the same things. This was a surprise. Gold. AU is gold. Tell me why it's there. That's why the sun is throwing all kinds of elements off, not just one. Okay, now I'm going to explain why the organics. Where did the organics come from? Now, some of the journals say, well, it probably come from the solar wind or someplace else. It didn't. It came right here from the Earth. Now, this is called the Raelians. They're little one and multiple cell animals. This is what they look like when they're alive. And this is where the article is. So you can, in Journal Nature, volume 538, October 2016. So this stuff occupies the entire column of ocean water from the surface all the way down to the bottom. Real small stuff. This is what a close-up looks like when they're dead. They make this glass type, silicone type shell, real small. And this is a probe that they had in there. That's why they're showing you the difference. This is from electron microscopes. This is not even a millimeter or barely. Okay, this is what I think is happening. Remember what I said, that when the sun novas, the Earth stops its rotation. That's the reversal point. And the sun does nova. Now, for about 8 hours, I estimate the Earth does not rotate at all. It just sits there. So the side of the Earth that faced the sun last time, I believe, was, if you drew a longitude through China and part of India, you get some of the Pacific Ocean at that time was rushing over China and India. And so that water a lot of it got evaporated. Now, we know from with 30 or 40 to 100 years after the reversal, the water was at least 400 feet down. So, and that's worldwide. So that means on the sun side, probably 700 or 800 feet of ocean water got evaporated. So you imagine those little tiny creatures, plus a whole bunch of other stuff, everything from jellyfish to all kinds of fish. Here the sun novas, and is basically boiling away the water. What do you think happens to their little bodies? They turn into a liquid. They're boiled out. So their guts, their cells, and contents of their cells get evaporated along with the seawater up into the atmosphere. So, excuse how badly I try to do this. I'm trying to show clouds around the Earth. This is what it would look like. That the Earth would just be covered with one big monstrous cloud of very, very hot steam. Very hot steam. I don't know how far in the atmosphere it would go, but it wouldn't surprise me to go to 40, 50,000 or 100,000 feet up. This is actually a dust shell from V830 Manocritus, and I spread it out. So this is what a dust shell looks like from a nova when it expands. This thing would actually look almost like a wall coming towards the Earth at 1,550 miles per second, real fast. So what's it going to do? It's going to take this stuff and wipe it clean, at least on the sun side that it hits. And it's going to push it away, and out it goes into space. If you were to look at the Earth or Venus or any planet that has an atmosphere, after this thing passed, it would look like we had a tail. That's where Velikovsky was wrong. Yes, he read the legends, the mythologies that said Venus was a comet because it had a tail. No, it had a tail because this dust shell hit the planet, evaporated or took away a lot of the atmosphere on that sun side, and pushed it out into space. This is a smoke ring. The reason I showed it here is this. I came across two mythologies when I was doing Reality Revealed back in 1977. And there was one from the Chinese. Well, their mythology is that they saw fire-breathing dragons in the sky. So what's the shape of a dragon that they show? It's a big, long tube. So you imagine, remember, this is 17 to 18 hours after the sun novas, and after 8 hours, the Earth starts rotating in the direction. So this dust shell would have hit a longitude along Brazil, is where I think it hit. Brazil, United America. And so they were kind of on the back side or the lip side of the Earth. I'll show you. That's them. So this dust shell hits there, and they're kind of on the back side of the Earth. There. So they looked, their ancestors looked up in the sky, and they saw these tubes, these eddies of flame going past the Earth as eddies. So their legends try to remember this event by saying a fire-breathing dragon. I can forgive them. Now, the legends from Russia, near Siberia, the Volga River, theirs was very good. This is in chapter 11 of Reality Revealed. I actually have all the text online. If you go to Vector Associates, you can go into there and read chapter 11. It's all there, the ASCII text. They're on the backside of the Earth, and all of a sudden, they have a legend that says they saw the Earth burning from both horizons, fire from both horizons. So imagine these eddies of this fire going up and past them, and they looked up in the sky. Pretty frightening. Okay, now we'll get back to what we should be doing. Carbon-14 dating. I'm going to give you the weaknesses of it first, and then I'll show you the evidence of it. Okay, this is BP in science means before present. So here, and you go back in time. So carbon-14 dating is only good to about 17,000 years old. And the problem with it is this. This is a steady state idea that nothing influences it. But as I've shown, when the sun novas, it sends off lots of cosmic rays which interact with nitrogen, which becomes carbon-14. So you have this spike of carbon-14 every so often. Now, it's helpful to figure out what side of the Earth was facing the sun when it novaed if you're going back in time. It could be helpful. The other way is the fission tracks in everything from bone, mica, glass, things like that. An example of this, where you have a problem with carbon-14 dating, one looks younger than other. In China, I showed this before, you have carbon-14 dating of 7,700 years, 7,800 years, below 11,000, 10,000, 13,000. Now, this is impossible unless you understood that you've got a spike of carbon-14 because of the nova creating more carbon-14. Now, the steady state idea of the slope, forget it. It's not real. Short-term magnetic reversals they're hard. Remember I showed you earlier that you got a collapsing Earth magnetic field. This does not have to go to 0 and then reverse. It probably goes to about 20,000 nanoteslas. We used to call it gammas, and now they changed it all to nanoteslas, but to about 20,000. So on one book I said 15,000, 15 to 20,000, it then reverses and snaps, and it goes in the other direction. So, but it's hard to detect something that's only down to 20,000 nanoteslas. So I understand that. What I do object to is they had a standard practice, and I read it in one of the journals, that they would throw out any data that was less than 20,000 years. But that's cherry picking your data. And it'll give you a false result, which is maybe what they want. All polar reversals preceded ice ages by the geological evidence and the carbon-14 dating we know of. That has always been the case. They just don't understand or don't know the mechanism. This is the reference for those. Alan Cox again and Thomson. Both these guys know. Okay. Ice ages. If you have the evidence of an ice age, the correlation of that is you had to have the heat from the sun to create the ice age and the ice field. So you find the evidence of the ice field and the carbon-14 days of the terminal moraines or the drumlins, and you got it. Then you've basically shown that you've got a star that has produced a tremendous amount of heat, a lot of evaporation that eventually creates the ice field. This is what moraine looks like. When you see rocks that have been so rounded off and smoothed off, it means it was ground in the ice field. Remember, these ice fields are 1,000 to 4,000 or 5,000 feet thick, and it grinds the stones and looks like this. That's what you'll look for. In here, when they find a tree, a root, even a dead body, an animal's bones, they can carbon-14 date it and give you an idea of when it was there. So here's the carbon-14 dating of everything from peat bogs to anything else they could find they can carbon-14 date. Here's the author, here's the years, the journal, the volume, page, and the date. You can go check it yourself. And woody peat bogs. Now, I have to explain, I'll go into peat bogs a little bit later. A peat bog is the precursor to brown coal, which eventually becomes regular coal. And I've seen ratios of 20 to 1, 6 to 3 to 1. I don't think they really totally know, but it's caused by decaying organic material, whether it be logs or grasses or whatever, moss, and you wind up with peat bogs, but you can carbon-14 date them. So they do a pretty good job of it. So you have a peat bog like before a reversal, then you don't have anything, nothing. And then you'll have vegetation after maybe 500 to 1,000 years later, it'll start producing again. So you have to understand that, here's a dating of 11,820 plus or minus. So this is after a reversal, but not much after. So it goes on like this. Shells, peat bogs, organic material. They're all centered around my 12,000 year cycle. The best is to read these journal articles. They go into it better than I can in a few minutes on a video, but everything for even pollen spores, I was actually surprised they were able to do shell, but they do. 24,000 years, glaciation, shells, obsidian. They were using fission track dating for this, which is iffy, but they came up with 21,000 plus or minus 4,000 years. Mammoth bones, organic debris, wood, and stuff like this. This may be an indication that Italy was facing the sun when it novaed, and then the next time was over China. So it may tell you what side of the Earth is facing when the next one happens. That's one of the reasons why the foundation needs grant money, donations, to hire geologists to look for things like that. We may be able to figure out what side of the Earth is going to be facing the sun when it novas next time, and then also tells us what side of the Earth is going to be facing when this dust shell hits us. Mammoth bones, organic debris, could be almost anything. Wood, and organic material, again, from all over the world. Greece, Maine, Canada, Arctic Canada, Yukon. I was in the Yukon. Gold mining. 36,000 years. This is 3 cycles back. Glaciation means the deposits left by the glacier, the moraine. Peat bogs, carbonized trees, everything. All around the 36,000 year mark. It goes on like that. With variations, keeping in mind that you're going to have some variations because of the problem of the carbon-14 production. It does change depending on what side of the Earth you're on. 48,000 years, wood, peat, organic material, peat and silt. Again, nicely centered around that 4 cycles back. 60,000 years, that's 5 cycles back. Again, peat, organic material, coral. All over the world, see? Now there's more. I could have had like 5 times this, but there was no room in the textbook. It was getting ridiculous anyway. 6 cycles back, 72,000 years. This is about the limit for carbon-14 dating. Wood, peat, organic material, again, coral. Again, same thing. Some of the same guys were doing the same research. They did some of them did all over the world. I think they were probably onto the same thing I was. It's about the right period, 1978. Everything came back from the moon. And I think they, like I showed from Ken Kuzman's letter, quite a few scientists knew or had a hunch that something bad happens with the sun. I don't think they were willing to do anything, or could they do anything about it. Anyway, peat bogs, dead plant material. It can only accumulate when you've got a normal situation. So you can have it before the reversal and 500 to 1,000 years after, the peat bogs will start developing again. Here's dating just peat bogs. And what it does tell you in some places where there was severe cooling, that would be Ice Age stuff. Peat bog here, this is all over the world, but quite a few scientists were in the University of Washington, and they did a lot of Washington stuff. England also, all the same stuff. So you can see it's a massive amount of geological evidence, carbon-14 dated evidence, that shows that these cycles happen roughly every 12,000 years. Here's carbon-14 dating of peat bogs again. Here's 4 cycles, 5, and then 6. This is what a peat bog looks like. This is all organic material from moss to grasses or anything like that. They rot. And eventually this becomes coal. Non-glacial evidence of a polar reversal. This was clays and mud, lake mud, that has organic material in it they can wind up doing something with. And again, most of it's in the United States, but this one was Sweden. Marine clays, muds, various clays from Sweden, Mexico, UK, basically good Western Hemisphere stuff. Again, all around that area. And there's the references for you. Here's 2 cycles back. Human cremations, Lake Mungo, Australia, 26,000 plus or minus. 48,000 baked tree. Okay, so that should cover the carbon-14 dating proof that there is 6 cycles. They all seem to be grouped around 12,000 years. Again, it's around an ice age every time and a mass extinction. So that should be enough proof to you that this Clarke cycle exists, and you can't have the ice age without the heat from the sun. Therefore, it did nova every time. That's the part that's, when you find the Clarke cycle, it's a psychological thing with most humans, is that you have to realize we're in a synchronous system. This isn't the only Clarke cycle we've found. I mean, there's lots of them. There's one that a geologist found that like every 4,000 years, there's a big weather or solar difference or change. And there's journals about that. But you find these cycles. Once you find a bunch of cycles, you know you're in a synchronous system. You have no place else to run and hide from that. In other words, you're in the Matrix or the 13th floor. Okay. Magnetic fields. The theory that's being taught us, which is wrong, is that you have a geodynamo in the center of the Earth and from the core, and it circulates through here. Now, this is the reference you can go to for this stuff. The circulation in the Earth's molten outer core creates a giant dynamo that generates our magnosphere to safeguard us from solar and cosmic radiation. By the way, at the time of the reversal, we don't have a magnetic field. It goes bye-bye. So those cosmic rays and other particles have no problem getting to the surface. Think about it. Okay, there's 5 problems of geodynamo. Like I think I mentioned, I already had spoken to Professor Busi at UCLA when I was living in LA at the time, and he knew a few of the weaknesses, but these are the main ones. The melting point of iron is the Curie temperature, which is between 950 to about 1050. Above that, it loses its magnetic properties, period, because the molecules are moving around too much. 2, the theory depended on convection currents driven by seismic earthquakes, but that is pure conjecture. You read the journals, you see what I mean. Earthquakes could not generate a fast enough convection current to maintain a stable magnetic field. This thing would have to be vibrating like jello all the time, and that doesn't happen. Therefore, you can't have the convection currents to create the magnetic field, the electrostatic field. 3, the biggest problem, toroidal geodynamo theory, is that toroidal vector fields cannot act as dynamos because the magnetic field, when they cross each other, they cancel each other out. So that theory should have gone into the toilet from day one, but they didn't. They're hanging on to it for dear life. The other reasons are this. It cannot explain the cyclical nature of the reversals. Forget it. 5, when the field reverses, it cannot explain why the Earth changes rotation and rotates in the opposite direction. When I did the section on the oceans, I think it was part 3, I thought the evidence that the deep sea canyons and what the continental shelves looked like all over the world was enough proof that there wasn't any salt water there. The only way that could be is either stopped its rotation and the ocean went that away, and then other water went in and dug those channels repeatedly over many, many cycles. It wasn't just one cycle that created those canyons. And the reason I'm mentioning is that somebody actually wondered about that. They should have known that, though. Here's the references for it. Busi, who I spoke to, and this guy didn't, but we know these reversals happen cyclically through time, pretty even. By the seafloor spreading, the Atlantic ridge, they've had maybe 50 or 100 Navy and NOAA tracks where they actually record the Earth's magnetic field reversals with a magnetometer dragged behind the boat and down to the bottom of the ocean to find these things. And they know they're more or less even. The problem again is when it goes down to 20 or 30,000 gammas, it's hard to pick up. So they may miss some. Doesn't mean it's not there. It just means it's too faint. Also, the variable is how much iron is in the magma that you can pick it up, that it actually stores a magnetic reversal. I mentioned this earlier, that it's hard to find short-term reversals. All magnetic reversals have preceded Ice Age sediments, and the reversals have been nearly equal length, as I said. And this is the reference for that by Alan Cox, a very good guy. I think he knows the Sun Nova. I don't even know if he's still alive, probably isn't. Most of these guys who did the work in the 60s and 70s were already in their 40s or 50s. This is over 50, 60 years ago. They're probably all dead. Okay, what happens to the crust of the Earth during the reversal? This is where it gets nasty. It's not just the oceans you have to worry about. The crust of the Earth is only about, what, from 20 to 40 miles, 50 miles thick. And it swims on the sea of magma in this mantle, which is going to be heated up because as we get closer to the reversal, every time there's a sunspot cycle, there's a spike of energy, like I mentioned earlier in one of the earlier videos. It heats up the outer core, and it turns and heats up the mantle. So this thing's going to be really hot. And we're going to have a lot more earthquakes and volcanoes, which I'll go into shortly. But you'll understand the mechanism. It's a simple mechanism. Charlie could have figured this stuff out. So this thing, our crust is basically swimming on this outer mantle that's going to be superheated. It's going to be heated up. So what do you think happens when the Earth's rotation stops? Not only does the oceans keep going, but all these plates, continental plates, start banging up against each other. And I made kind of a study of it, and I wanted to see how many mountain ranges had a north-south orientation, because that would have been perpendicular to the force of energy, which is this way. So this is one between, Norway and Iceland. I'm going to show you a bunch throughout the whole world. Pretty vertical. In fact, the mountain range here has a north-south orientation. It's not perfect. It doesn't have to be perfect. Rocky Mountains, more or less north-south orientation. Appalachia, this mountain range up here in northern Canada. By the way, this is, look at this, a deep sea canyon all the way down to 15,900 feet below current sea level. And there's a river channel. Gee, where'd all the ocean water in the Atlantic go? That way. Or in some places that way. Yeah. Sometimes the evidence is so overwhelming and so obvious. How they couldn't click in their head what's going on, I don't understand. I don't know. Pacific Ocean. This ridge looks pretty straight, has a north-south orientation. The mountain range on the western part of Australia, north-south orientation. The Andes all the way down, north-south orientation. Southern Indian Ocean is the same one, north. Here's the Ganges, all the way down to 13,000 feet. This is 16,000. About here, 13,000, 14,000 feet below current sea level. Gee, where's the Indian Ocean then? Remember, I tell you, fresh water doesn't floats on top of salt water. Salt water is heavier than fresh water. You can't have this freshwater river doing this unless there was no salt water here. Here's another one, China. Sorry, Africa. Madagascar, north-south orientation here. This ridge here, north-south orientation. This along here, and this is South Africa here. North-south orientation for this. Great Rift Valley is north-south orientation. China, Korean Peninsula, north-south orientation. Japan itself is this whole thing of north-south orientation. This obviously also. All would be perpendicular to the direction of force. when the Earth stopped its rotation, regardless of which direction, by the way, it doesn't matter. This is also interesting. Whenever you have a cliff and the erosion is the same from the top and the bottom, it means this thing rose probably in one shot. And what's interesting about this, I liked, it rose twice. After one reversal, it rose this much, and then it could be another 12 or 24,000 years, and then it rose again about the same distance. This here too looks like even with this. So, you know, it depends on what's underneath here, what kind of a slip fault is there that caused this uplift. But this is an example of what happens to the Earth when the Earth's rotation stops. That you have massive Earth movements. And when we're talking, this is like an 8 Richter, 8+ Richter earthquake. I think this is Kobe, Japan. Excuse me. You're going to have an earthquake 8, 9, and more, not lasting 1 or 2 minutes or 3 minutes. Oh no. This is going to last for hours, some may be days, until those plates stabilize. Got the picture? So, I'll show you some others. This, my God, what happened to my high-resolution picture? This is a 9.5 Richter earthquake in Chile in 1960. Not much left. I'm surprised these buildings are standing. I had a better picture of this. I have no idea what turned out so bad. Here's the Alaska one in 1964. This was also 9.2 on a Richter scale. Well, it lasted a few minutes. Imagine one that's going to last for hours, literally hours, until those plates stabilize. Maybe 10, 15 hours, maybe a whole day. I don't know. This is interesting. Now, this is a lava field. This is just west of Spokane, Washington. Another geologist figured this out. And he was drilling on plywood, his drill, wood, and he noticed the sawdust was setting up standing waves due to the drill's vibration. So he clicked in his head, gee, that's maybe what caused this. So imagine this as a sea of lava. A lot of eastern Washington is a sea of lava, was at one time. And the vibration of the Earth was so great that it set up standing waves in the lava. Then when the ocean went across this thing, froze it in time. And we have this. Volcanic material. This is each sunspot cycle, sunspot maximum. I did 3 years. You'll notice every single one, there's an increase in volcanic activity, either on it or a couple of years after. Because remember, it takes, I had found it, if there was a solar eruption, a bunch of sunspots, if you were near sunspot maximum, within 240 or so days, there was an increase in earthquakes on the planet. If it was sunspot minimum, it was like 280 or so days. So it takes time for the heat to percolate into the outer mantle that this thing could happen. So each one, you have an increase in volcanic activity. Every one, either on it or just a year or so after it. Like here, went up pretty high. This already you can see a general increase because, here, this is our 1959, this is Gleisberg. And a steady increase like this. The base level keeps going up. And that's what's going on. So that's the mechanism for what's going on. So in other words, when you have the reversal, you're going to have volcanoes going off, but you may have the increase in volcanic activity from 220, 240 days after the reversal, a lot of volcanoes going off, a lot, massively. Mid-Atlantic Ridge dating. This is what I already covered before about magnetic reversals. Shorter than 20,000 years, it's kind of hard to detect. This is the reference for it. Frequency of geomagnetic reversals and symmetry of the dipole field again, trying to figure it out. But this is some of the articles you can see where they're admitting they have a problem, but they also discard it or ignore it, and they shouldn't. This is volcanic activity at the time of a polar reversal 12,000 years ago, and also 24. This is, again, organic material that was found underneath the lava, sometimes in it. And these are the locations, but they're all centered around the 12,000 year period. Some have a wider range. I don't know if it's correct or not. This one seems to be okay, though. I remember, I think some of the articles actually, they were calling it around a reversal period, a magnetic reversal period. Here's 24,000 years, Japan, New Zealand, etc. Again, all centered around that 2 cycles back, 24,000 years ago. 36,000 years ago, same thing. And 48,000 years ago. And there's the references. That's the end. Okay. I hope you got this and hope you enjoyed it. The next video, part 4B rather, is going to be on mass extinctions and the creation of new species, and also the glass beads and whether a comet really causes this stuff, including the reversal. I hope you enjoyed it and hope you learned something from it. And I tried not to go long on this one, but my intent is to teach you what's really happening, and because I think we've all been lied to too much or deceived at best. And the only way anyone's going to survive this thing is the truth get out. And we have to basically force these politicians to do the right thing and admit something's wrong. Most of the politicians don't even know this stuff. I think a few people in the CIA know it and a few other agencies, but this is kind of a thing that does not keep a very good secret. You know what I mean? Anyway, I hope you enjoyed it.